Hey guys, it's Syama here, CEO of Scaling Retail, and this week we're doing a market update. So, what are we seeing in the news? What's happening in the world of retail, and how are brands and retailers starting to adapt and change as the industry is starting to open up? So, we've been starting to see, guys, phase two of reopenings, which is really exciting. A lot of direct-to-consumer brands are still really thinking that brick and mortar is going to be an important source of their business and how they're growing their companies. In a recent interview with David from Warby Parker, he was talking about how he's really doubling down on e-com, but guys, the brick and mortar experience is still something that's going to be important as we start to reopen the economy. And I'd say looking into 2021 is definitely going to be something that we'll be looking at. So many of you guys have been really focusing on how we're thinking about the experiential models of retail. Traditionally, when we think about experiential, we're thinking about pop-up shops, we're thinking about in-store, we're thinking about how we can actually create something that is beneficial, and how can we actually create something that's going to be able to really kind of give how can we actually create something that's actually going to be very helpful for these kinds of consumers to actually be able to engage with brands and be able to have experiential. And so what I want to talk about today is how are we going to be looking at experiential in these phase two of reopenings, and then ultimately what does the fall look like? Guys, companies are opening up in terms of being able to do these kind of individual walkthroughs of spaces. So from the consumer side, what we're seeing is actually a nice kind of gentle reopening. However, not all of the employees of those stores are coming back, right? Not everyone is actually having the same kind of 360 experience that they used to. It's almost feeling a little bit more like those personal shopper days where you made an appointment, you came in, and you had almost the entire store to experience for yourself. I think that that's going to be helpful as we look to kind of reopen. There is certainly a large demographic of consumers who really just have never really adopted to online shopping. And I think that that is a funny thing to think about. Even though we've seen a huge surge and increase in online shoppers, we actually have to acknowledge the fact that there is an entire segment of consumers that actually never really caught on to the e-commerce trend and are currently really haven't been spending any money in the last few months. And so who am I speaking about specifically in that market? Well, we're looking at the kinds of consumers who are maybe of the baby boomer generation, more affluent, kind of used to that personal shopper experience, used to having their person at Saks or at Neiman's, and being able to, get that text message from that sales associate. So they never actually had to really adopt to that e-com model. And during this time of quarantine, they never actually caught on to that e-com model. So I think what we're going to see is kind of a strong pull in the luxury sector towards these one-on-one shopping experiences and how consumers are going to start to re-engage with brick and mortar. And then I think we'll start to see it open up more towards these other kinds of products and consumers. California recently announced that everyone had to wear a face mask. So those of you guys who are in that face mask industry, or you've been producing cloth masks, that is still going to be a trend that we continue to see, at least until there is a vaccine. And still, guys, it's looking like another 12 to 18 months for a vaccine to come out. So 12 months from now has us at summer 2021, and then 18 months almost has us coming in towards the tail end of next year. So as you guys are looking at the products that you're creating and what the new market opportunities are, keep in mind, like, this is going to be a reality despite the openings. This is going to be a reality for quite some time in terms of how we look at that cloth mask and that PPE business. Another important thing to consider, guys, the PPP loan, so that's the payment protection loan that came out. There are new rules that are coming out in terms of the forgiveness of it and kind of the repayment cadence. So make sure that if you did qualify for one of those loans, that you actually have an understanding of whether or not it will be forgiven or not. And then the economic disaster loans are another important consideration. A lot of businesses out there went and applied for those loans. Some of them were getting loans in excess of $2 million. But if you were able to capture those dollars at that 3.75%, interest payback rate, what's important to understand about that is that can actually really help to fuel your business if it's allocated properly. So we are going to see, kind of coming out of this crisis, a crop of businesses that have been able to manage their finances well, and that have been able to take advantage of these grants and these loans to be able to help further inject strategically capital into their business. And that, I think, is really, really valuable. So some people will have done that. Other people will have used those resources to help pay their existing employees and kind of help tide them over. And then other people maybe didn't qualify for that, and they're seeing some struggle, certainly if their businesses are not rebounding. Now, McKinsey just came out with a recent study that talked about the percentages of businesses that we're going to see closures coming up through this COVID time period. And what's unfortunate here is, obviously, topping off the sector, we see businesses that are focused in hospitality, in the entertainment, and in the food industries. And then shortly after that, we actually see retail. And guys, when we're thinking about retail, that means, yes, the small to medium-sized businesses out there that are their own brands, that are their own retail stores, are some of the most vulnerable. And they are projecting that a large percentage of them actually will be closing down during this time period. So as you are looking and evaluating your own business, perhaps you decided to launch during this time period. Perhaps you had a business and you've taken this time to peel back the layers and do some more business diving into what the value is of your business and how you want to move forward. Keep in mind that things are going to thin out. So the more strategic you are now in terms of the deployment of money, time, strategy, the higher probability you're going to have of coming out stronger from this crisis, rather than someone who was, let's say, having a panic attack during the time period and wasn't able to sit down and develop a plan or a strategy. So we're seeing trend forecasting, business forecasts coming out that are really anticipating a lot of you guys out there today will be shutting your doors. And in order to keep that something that's at bay, it'll be important to develop kind of what that go forward strategy is. A lot of discounts and a lot of things that people have been implementing are starting to see diminishing returns and value. So if you're thinking about, launching new products right now, if you're thinking about launching them and quickly putting them on sale, I'd ask you to seriously consider the time length and frame that you're looking at, that you want to test it and see if full price selling is actually going to work before you go ahead and take those markdowns. So guys, lots of different components to consider. On the diversity and inclusion front, still a lot of talk on how fashion and retail is approaching those markets and handling that internally. Not a lot of great news on that front, other than, the companies that have their finger on the pulse are making the right strategic steps forward. The companies that don't know what they're doing or have been racist or exhibited poor behavior in the past are being called out for that, and that's good. But my concern is that there really is no litmus test to hold these businesses accountable. So one of my biggest concerns is, we talk about diversity and inclusion. We talk about, how we want to move the needle, but who's actually out there who is monitoring that or making sure that that is something that's being adhered to? And that's very similar to how we think about the environment, or how we think about other issues that are important to us. So it's not enough to say that you stand for something. It's not enough to say that you are taking a stand. You really have to be forthright about it, but then also there does have to be some sort of governing body, right? How do we actually know when a business is lying and when they're telling the truth here? So when it comes to things like diversity and inclusion, I'm a big fan of being authentic and real. And it does force you to take a hard look at where you stand in terms of your hiring practices and your diversity practices. And what does your business look like, and how are you actually reflective of your own values, or the values that you actually believe to be correct. So emergent out of, these last few months of quarantine, right? I think that, and I say emergent because, guys, I'm heading back to LA this weekend. So I've been in New York the last couple months, and I'm heading back to LA. And so that's going to be, emergent for me. And yes, I'm a little terrified, mostly because I haven't been on an airplane in a few months, and I don't really know what it's going to look like or what it's going to be like or any of that. But I think as we look at this from a totality, right, of these last 3 months, what do the next 3 months look like? Number one, businesses that are not still currently focusing on their business models and strategies are going to continue to fall down. And now we're actually seeing that the unemployment rate, even though jobs are picking back up a little bit, the unemployment rate is still going to be terrible. So the economy as it stands, right, if you have a business, if you're not mapping out the business, coming up with a strategic plan, and getting things in order, you really should consider putting a pause or a pin in your business until you're able to regroup and reground with it in the future. And I'd say that's in the next 6 to 12 months. If you have the capital and the ability to do some forecasting and planning, this is the time to do it. So there's that component to it. There's also coming up with your values and principles as an organization. So this is a good time for vision mapping, clarity, coming up with strategic plans, to actually understand, well, what are the values, what do we stand for, and how are we actually being reflective and reflexive and looking internally at how we espouse those things, right? What do our hiring practices look like, et cetera. And then also in terms of the production and merchandising and buying cycles. So what's interesting here about those components are that the market is opening. People are going to need to buy goods. The question is, will you have goods available to be sold to them? And if you don't have the capital now to produce goods in anticipation of the fall, you might find yourself in this pickle, right? So there is a need for capital right now for small business. I highly encourage all of you to look at the economic disaster loans, look at opportunities to get cheap capital so you can leverage it and you can do something with it. If you don't have the networks or you don't have the resources to help you allocate those resources, companies like Scaling Retail are really helpful for that. So when you're looking at how to plan your budget, right? How do you want to spend money? Where do you want to hedge those investments? That's how you do it, right? You get someone who knows. And that's really, really important. For some of the businesses that I've been involved in, one client, one project, in the last 2 months, did $1.5 million in revenue, right? And the profit margins on that were very high. And how was that? Well, strategic allocation of budgets and making sure that your resources are well spent. So it's just time to be smart, right? It's like if your business wasn't built to last, it's not going to last. If you were not prepared to be the CEO of your company, it's going to show up right now. If your business lacked diversity and inclusion, guess what? You're being exposed. So I guess my biggest piece of advice at this point is to be, to take the time to do the work, to read the books, to understand how your brand is going to be iterating during this time period, to spend time even thinking about 2021 or what does your business model look like in 5 years? How have things actually shifted in the market in terms of your consumer spending? We presented a pretty spectacular brand DNA to a client of ours last week, and we had to put in there a whole new type of content, and that content was all around the effects of COVID on consumer shopping and spending and what kinds of products and trends are important for that client. So guys, if you're wondering, I've had this business, it's floundering, what do I do now? It's important to say, well, where do we actually see the consumer market heading? Where do we actually see people wanting to spend their resources? And is my business able to pivot, right? Am I able to take advantage of that? Okay, so that's all from me, guys, in terms of where things are headed, how we're looking at the future of retail in these next few months. We have a couple really amazing webinars and things happening this week. So we've got on Thursday, I'm doing something with Liberty Fairs, talking all about e-commerce and how to build e-commerce. And we'll be talking to some store owners. So if you guys are interested in how to build your e-commerce businesses, tune into that on Thursday. The link is going to be in our bio. And then also, I would suggest on Friday, we're going to be talking with one of the executives at Off Price. And for a lot of you guys, and I think that most people don't pay too much attention to this, but I used to be a buyer and Gucci in the off-price division. And I got to tell you, we went from $50 million to $100 million in 2 years. And that's small, right? Gucci's like a huge business. But for my business, that was a really big ROI, right? That was like, oh my God, we did amazing. And when you're thinking about liquidation of products, and when you're thinking about how you're diversifying your revenue stream as a brand, or you're thinking about how you can actually protect your margins as a retailer, off-price can be pretty incredible. And so those of you guys who are unsure about the meaning of markdowns, you're unsure about how to look at a markdown or off-price business, you've got to tune in on Friday. It'll be really exciting. It'll be great. It'll be pretty fun. And the link for that is also in our bio. So lots of cool stuff going on. And then we'll be back with the live one-on-one consultations on Friday. So lots of my face on the internet this week. And if you guys have questions or things you want to make sure that we cover or talk about, please feel free. Send me an email at hello@scalingretail.com. And if you want to be a part of the one-on-one live consultation, send me an email there as well, and we can see about having you on the show. And if you're wondering what that looks like, take a look at our IG Live. We've got our IGTV. We've got these episodes, if you will, up there, so you can see what it's like to be on IGTV with me live and to be able to workshop your business and see what it is that you should be working on. All right, guys, that is it for me. Wish me luck as I head back to LA on Saturday. And you'll be seeing a lot more of me digitally in the next few days. I'll talk to you later. Bye.